everyone, welcome back to Stitches and Scribbles. This is my video for my August 2021 bullet journal. As you can see, I'm starting with my table of contents and using my washi tape to mark the edge of the page so I can tell where the month of September starts. This time I went with a color palette of neutrals as well as some blues and purples to do a cozy yarn and crafts inspired theme. I started off by drawing a basket and filled it in with lots of balls of yarn to show off my color palette that I had chosen for this month. Normally in September I do a back to school theme because in the past I was a middle school teacher and this is the first year that I will not be returning to school. So I wanted to choose a theme to represent my new direction in life, so I decided to go with some crafty things. I think I'm going to miss back to school a little bit. I've already seen all of the teacher and student supplies out at places like Target, and it did make me a little bit sad, but I'm also really excited to be doing other things as well. Once I put in the outline of all of my balls of yarn, I wrote out the title for the month in cursive and then connected it back to one of the yarn balls of the same color so that it looked like yarn was coming out to form the words. I also added some knitting needles and a crochet hook sticking out. I then went over the whole thing and outlined with a thin marker. This is a Stabilo pen that I'm using to outline, and I'm using the zebra mild liners for all the colors. I used that black Stabilo to add all of the yarn strands to the yarn balls, as well as outline the letters for September so that it showed up a little bit more clearly. I've had a lot of practice drawing yarn balls, although I've never done a bullet journal theme with it before. Even in the ones before I started videotaping my bullet journal. I thought this was a really fun theme, and I don't think I've seen it before on YouTube or on Pinterest or anything, so I was really excited to try it out. I also really like how these cursive letters ended up looking. The black outline just made them pop a little bit more, and then it matched the texture of the yarn balls that were in the basket as well. I then filled in some of those missing gaps with the color so that it looked even. I always add a quote on the opposite side of my month title. This one I just went simple with "Yarn is my happy place." I then did a shadow for the two words at the bottom. And I did the same outlining technique for the word yarn. I then dove right into my monthly spreads, or not monthly, weekly spreads. I kept the weekly spreads pretty simple. I was feeling a little burnt out because I've had a lot of events lately, so I decided to go with some pretty simple themes. For this one, I just did the outline in a lighter purple, added the dates and days of the week, and then I did little yarn balls that looked like they were hanging from the top of the page, with the same technique that I used for the title page. I simply drew a circle in each color I wanted to use with the tail coming out of the top. There's one at the bottom that you can't see from this angle. I do apologize for the fact that some of the page is off screen, and I had to keep moving the journal around to make sure that you could see what I was doing. I had to switch filming locations in my apartment because we're having trouble with the circuits in the room that I use as my office, where the lights keep flickering, and I didn't want that to affect the quality of video, so I moved out to my living room and was doing this on the coffee table, but that meant that my tripod didn't hit quite the angle that I usually need it to in order to make my videos, so there is some sliding around going on. I did like filming at the coffee table. It was a little bit easier to see what I was doing. I think I just need to mess with the tripod a little more. For the second week, I started with a brown outline to do my days of the week and added the dividers as little stitches instead of solid lines. I had high hopes of doing a cross-stitch inspired pattern for this page. You can see that I started doing all the little X's, but I very quickly realized that my marker size was actually way too big to do this on the dot grid, so I ended up just filling that in and making it a solid line. I don't actually cross-stitch at all. I just thought it would have been a cute accent, but that just wasn't working with the size marker and paper that I had. So I just filled it in and decided to do the numbers and stitches instead to kind of keep the crafty theme. And I added a row of stitches along the top and the bottom. Added days of the week and my labels for my other sections. On to the next week, I did some loopy yarn strands for the top and bottom of my daily sections. I decided to have a little fun with the font I used for the numbers on this one, although my 9 and 19 ended up looking a little bit like a letter G, which I wasn't thrilled about, but I think it looks okay. For the next one, I did a squiggly line for the top and bottom to kind of mimic a zigzag stitch like you'd see on a sewing machine. Another thing that I don't actually do, but that was the thought process going on here. And then I decided to separate my weekly sections with knitting needles. And then my divider between Saturday and Sunday was a crochet hook, but I realized I cut it off as I was drawing it. But I promise that's a crochet hook. Added my days of the week in a Stabilo pen, as well as my other labels. For the final week, I started off with another shade of purple. And I had to go through Thursday, so I just extended to one section past the center of the page and did my usual dividing lines. I also messed up on this page. You can see I started with 26, even though 26 was Sunday, so I just filled in those boxes where I started writing the numbers and wrote the numbers over them in black instead. I've mentioned this in a previous video, but unlike a lot of bullet journalers who videotape their designs, I do not mark anything out in pencil ahead of time. I most of the time don't even know what I'm going to draw until I am sitting in front of my journal, so that means that I have a lot of mistakes that I end up having to cover up, but that's okay. Now I'm doing my monthly trackers. I started with boxes in each of my colors. The one at the top that I'm doing is my habit tracker, which is why it's a lot bigger. And this time I did all of the boxes in colors, but I did all of the titles in black, which you'll see later. Here I went in with my thin Stabilo pen and did a funky font for all the titles where I kept all of the horizontal sections of letters really low instead of towards the center. I realized that I have to make my craft section a lot bigger than I was in the past because I'm going through projects more quickly, so that's why it's a lot wider. Then I numbered all the days for my habit tracker so that later on I can fill in the habits that I want to work on and mark them off for each day. Then I started my mood tracker. I decided to do another knitting piece, so I did a long scarf on a pair of knitting needles with stripes for each day to track out my moods. I think drawing the mood trackers are my favorite part of doing these bullet journal spreads, and they always look really cool when they're done. I always number the sections just to make sure that I'm doing things on the right date. And then I added in my labels for all the moods that I track. As always, I ended up having to check what the list of moods actually was because I always forget. And I used my full color palette, putting them in the order that I wanted first, and then filling in the boxes so that I know which color to use. Here's the final flip through. Even though this was a fairly simple theme, I really like how it turned out, and I like that it is drastically different from my usual back to school theme with apples and markers and colored pencils and stuff like that. It's also a really calming color palette, which will be nice. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like other crafty stuff, don't forget to subscribe. You can also leave a like and a comment, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.